With the Pima County Sheriff's Office in Tucson in the national spotlight these days as they continue searching for Nancy Guthrie, they're also responding to some discrepancies reported in the sheriff's own past work history.
The sheriff at the center of the Nancy Guthrie investigation has just been blindsided by a revelation he managed to keep buried for over 40 years. Not something tied directly to the case, but something deeply personal. Something from a past he never expected anyone to dig up. And now, it's casting a long shadow over every decision he's made in this investigation. Newly uncovered records reveal he was quietly forced out of a previous police department under circumstances that were never made public. When reporters pressed him for answers, he didn't push back. He didn't even try to explain. Instead, he said just 6 words. 6 words that, once you hear them, make everything feel unstable. Like the foundation of this entire case might already be cracking. But before we get into what's just come to light, we need to take a step back, because you already know how this story began, and there's no reason to repeat what's been circulating for weeks. It has now been 39 days since Nancy Guthrie, an 84-year-old woman, vanished from her home in Tucson's Catalina foothills in the early hours of February 1st. Blood discovered on her porch was confirmed to be hers. The doorbell camera, disabled. Not broken, disabled. Her pacemaker stopped transmitting at exactly 2:28 a.m. And surveillance footage captured a masked figure carrying a backpack later traced back to a Walmart purchase. Since that night, investigators have combed through thousands of hours of footage. They've chased down tens of thousands of tips. They've even put serious money on the table, $1 million from a family, another $100,000 from the FBI. And still nothing. No arrests. No named suspect. No charges. After 39 days, there isn't even a clear sign that an arrest is close. And yet the man leading this investigation, Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos, recently told NBC News something very different. So Sheriff, it's been 30 days since Nancy Guthrie disappeared. Are investigators any closer to finding whoever did this? I think the investigators are definitely closer.
It's been 30 days since Nancy Guthrie went missing. Are investigators any closer to finding the suspect or suspects?
I think the investigators are definitely close.
The same line, repeated week after week. We're closer. That's all. No timeline, no details, nothing you can actually hold on to. Just that one word, closer. The phrasing never shifts. The tone never changes. And most importantly, the substance never evolves. It sounds like progress, but it isn't. And once you realize that, something else starts to feel off. Because this week, the Arizona Republic dropped something that changes how you see all of this. Completely. This wasn't built on rumors. No anonymous leaks. No Reddit theories. No secondhand whispers passed around online. They went straight to the source. Official documents, employment history, internal disciplinary records, verified documented evidence. And what they uncovered reframes everything. Because those records show that Chris Nanos, the sheriff of Pima County, the face of this entire investigation since day one, didn't leave his previous law enforcement job the way people assumed. He wasn't promoted out. He wasn't transferred. And he definitely didn't walk away by choice. He was pushed out. Forced, quietly, permanently, under circumstances he never revealed, not once in over 40 years of public service. For decades, that truth stayed buried. On paper, his career looks clean, almost textbook. Years of service, rising through the ranks, building trust, winning elections, eventually taking control of a department responsible for more than 9,000 square miles of southern Arizona. The kind of resume that puts you in front of cameras when something like this happens. The kind of resume that makes people believe you. But that version of the story skips something critical. Because before Tucson, there was El Paso. Back in the late 1970s into the early 1980s, Nanos worked as a police officer with the El Paso Police Department in Texas. That part has always been public. It's listed. It's acknowledged. It's part of his official history. But the way that chapter ended, that was never mentioned. Not once. According to the documents obtained by the Republic, Nanos didn't leave El Paso under normal conditions. There was no clean exit, no smooth transition into the next phase of his career. He resigned in lieu of termination. And that phrase isn't just wording, it's a warning. Because in law enforcement, it means the decision had already been made. He was going to be fired. The resignation wasn't a choice. It was an escape hatch. A way to walk out without the word terminated stamped across his record. But the paperwork, that stays. Locked inside the system, and the timeline makes it even harder to ignore. The records show he left in 1982, but his official resume lists 1984. 2 missing years. 2 years unaccounted for, sitting quietly in his professional history for over 4 decades. That's not a minor oversight. That's a gap. And no one questioned it until now. Then you get to the disciplinary file. And this is where it stops looking like a single mistake and starts looking like something else entirely. Because this wasn't one bad day. It wasn't one lapse in judgment. It was a pattern, a consistent trail of issues that all point in the same direction. They're documented findings of insubordination, refusing direct orders from superiors. In a system built entirely on hierarchy and command, that's not small. That's fundamental. It raises a serious question. Can someone like that function inside the structure they're sworn to uphold? And then there's the finding of excessive force. Not an allegation, a finding, which means at some point, the line wasn't just approached, it was crossed. Separate from everything else, there's another entry in the file, a firearm discharge incident. It stands on its own, not tied to the excessive force finding, not buried inside another report, a completely separate event involving a weapon being fired. Then there's off-duty gambling, not rumor, not speculation, a documented disciplinary issue, serious enough to be formally written into his record. And it doesn't stop there. Repeated tardiness shows up too. Not a one-time slip, not a bad morning, a pattern, frequent enough, consistent enough, that it had to be officially noted. But the phrase that lingers, the one that hits harder than any single incident, is this: consistent inefficiency. That's not describing one mistake. That's a conclusion, a label built over time. Multiple evaluations, multiple reviews, a steady record of underperformance until it became undeniable. And then comes the moment where everything seems to collapse in on itself. The incident that appears to have pushed it over the edge. Nanos was suspended for 15 days without pay after allegedly injuring a robbery suspect during an arrest. 15 days. That's not routine discipline. That's a serious internal judgment. The kind that signals something went very wrong. And it didn't stay behind closed doors. The case was taken to a grand jury. Now he wasn't indicted. But the fact that it reached that level at all tells you how severe the situation was considered. Over the course of his time with El Paso PD, he racked up a total of 37 days of unpaid suspension. 37. By 1982, the department had seen enough. The decision was made. And that's when the resignation happened. But here's the part that doesn't go away, no matter how you look at it. Chris Nanos left the El Paso Police Department in 1982. His resume says 1984. That's not a typo. That's not a formatting issue. That's not one wrong digit. That is a 2-year gap, completely misaligned with reality, sitting in his official history. Unchallenged, unquestioned, unexplained, for more than 40 years. Through every role he held in Arizona law enforcement, through every campaign, every public appearance, every interview where his experience was presented as proof of his credibility. That gap was always there, and no one stopped to ask why. Or if they did, it never made it into the public record. Until now. So when the Arizona Republic brought those documents to him, that was the moment. The moment to confront it directly. He had options. He could have acknowledged the discrepancy, offered context, explained that it happened early in his career, that he moved forward, that it didn't define who he became. That's how situations like this are usually handled. But that's not what happened. Instead, he said this: "That's your urgent request? You sure you don't want to go back to my high school and ask why I got swats from the principal? Good luck with your hit piece." Think about that, because in those words, there's something missing. He didn't deny the records. He didn't explain the 2-year gap. He didn't address the discrepancy at all. He brushed it off, dismissed verified official documents as a hit piece. After that, the Pima County Sheriff's Department issued a statement, but not to challenge the findings, not to say the records were wrong. Instead, they called it a clerical error. Actually, 2 clerical errors. They also admitted there was another issue, a promotion date that had been listed incorrectly on his resume. Both mistakes were quietly corrected, only after the newspaper uncovered them. And that's where the explanation starts to fall apart. Because calling it a clerical error doesn't explain how it survives for 40 years. It doesn't explain how it slips through campaigns, background checks, public scrutiny. Decades of visibility without ever being fixed, until a reporter pulls the file. That's what the term clerical error is being asked to cover. And it doesn't quite hold. And this is where everything circles back to the Guthrie investigation, because the way this was handled, minimize, deflect, quietly correct only after exposure. That same pattern has been showing up in this case from the beginning. Go back to the crime scene. The moment Nancy Guthrie disappeared, her home became the center of everything. Blood on the porch, a disabled camera, personal belongings left exactly where they were. That scene needed to be locked down completely. It wasn't. Reporters were able to get close enough to see the blood themselves. And when Nanos was asked about that, he admitted something. If he had the chance again, he would have handled it differently. That admission matters more than it might seem at first, because securing a crime scene is an advanced strategy. It's not some high-level, specialized skill reserved for elite investigators. It's the foundation. Step 1. Before analysis, before interviews, before standing in front of cameras, you lock the scene down. Completely. That didn't happen here. Not the way it should have. And once that first step falters, everything that follows starts to feel less certain. Then came the optics. A moment that, on its own, might not raise alarms. But in this context, it hit differently. While the Guthrie family stood in front of cameras, pleading directly to the public, pleading to whoever took Nancy, begging for answers, for help, for anything, Chris Nanos was at a college basketball game. Now, in isolation, that can be explained. No one expects a sheriff to be physically present every second of an investigation. But timing changes everything. Context changes everything. And in a case where public trust is already fragile, that image, the family in distress, and the sheriff somewhere else entirely, it didn't just raise eyebrows. It deepened a perception problem that was already growing. Then there's the forensic decision. The DNA recovered from the scene wasn't simple. It was complex, mixed, multiple contributors requiring advanced, precise analysis. In cases like this, there's a standard path. The FBI lab in Quantico, that's what it exists for. High-level, complicated investigations, direct access to national databases, resources built specifically for moments like this. But that's not where the evidence went. It was sent to a private lab in Florida instead, and that choice didn't go unnoticed. Forensic experts openly question it, because when the most capable resource is already available and designed for exactly your situation, the expectation is simple. You use it. Then comes the issue of sequence. Early in the investigation, Nanos publicly stated that the family had been cleared, a definitive conclusion, but there was a problem. That statement came before the DNA analysis was complete. In any investigation, order matters. You gather evidence, you process it, then you draw conclusions. Here, that order was reversed. The conclusion came first. And even if it turned out to be correct, the process wasn't. And in a case like this, process isn't just technical, it's everything. Because once the sequence breaks, it affects every decision that follows. Then, there's the allegation that surfaced. That certain evidence may have been withheld from the FBI. Nanos denied it. There's no confirmed proof that it happened. But the accusation exists. And it doesn't exist in isolation. It lands on top of everything else. Every question, every inconsistency, every moment that already fell off. And that context changes how it's heard. Then comes the voice from inside. Not an outsider, not a critic looking in, but someone within the system itself. The president of the deputies union described the handling of this case as a personal ego matter. That's not a small statement. That's internal concern, spoken out loud. At the same time, outside agencies offered help. Drone teams, specialized search units, coordinated support, resources that could expand the scope of the investigation. And those offers were declined. The union leadership didn't agree with that decision. They said more help should have been accepted. So now it's not just outsiders questioning things. It's a divide within the department itself, playing out in public view. And through all of it, every briefing sounds the same. We're closer. No details, no timeline, no measurable progress, just closer. So where does that actually leave the case? Because the resume revelation isn't the investigation itself. It's the filter, the lens everything now gets viewed through. Nancy Guthrie is still missing. 39 days later, no arrest, no named suspect, no confirmed breakthrough. What investigators have shared recently points to something new. A damaged utility box near her home. That detail might connect to internet disruptions reported by multiple neighbors on the night of February 1st. Outages that affected home surveillance systems, right during the window when Nancy disappeared. If those outages weren't random, then someone knew exactly what they were doing. Someone knew how to disable visibility. And more importantly, when to do it. On March 5th, investigators went door to door in the Catalina foothills, asking two very specific questions. First, did you experience internet issues that night? Second, do you have any video footage from January 11th? That date stands out. January 11th is 3 weeks before the abduction, and investigators haven't explained why it matters. But they don't ask for footage from a specific day without a reason. Something happened, or someone was seen, and they already know it. There are witness accounts that start to fill in that gap. One neighbor described seeing a man in the area weeks before Nancy vanished. He didn't stand out because he was acting aggressively. He stood out because he didn't belong. Hunched posture, slow movements, studying the surroundings, and more specifically, studying Nancy's home. In a neighborhood like that, unfamiliar faces don't go unnoticed. People remember what feels out of place. And if that sighting ties back to January 11 teach, then it paints a different picture. Not a random act, not a spur-of-the-moment decision, but something planned. Someone who came early, to watch, to learn, and to prepare. And when you line up everything else, that image sharpens even more. The doorbell camera wasn't just inactive, it was deliberately disabled before entry. Whoever did this arrived at a moment when Nancy would be alone. They chose a window where response time would be at its slowest. There are signs they may have disrupted nearby surveillance systems entirely. That's not random. That's not rushed. That's calculated. Every move suggests planning, patience, intent. Now look at where the evidence actually stands. At the beginning, tips flooded into the FBI hotline. Now, they've slowed to a trickle. The reward has climbed past $1 million combined. And still, nothing has broken open. The DNA recovered from the scene hasn't matched anyone in Cody's. Gloves found nearby were traced, but to someone completely unrelated. The vehicle captured on camera around 2:36 a.m., still unidentified. The firearm holster hasn't pointed to a suspect. The Walmart backpack hasn't been tied to a buyer. Every major piece of evidence, every significant lead, is still unresolved, still open, still going nowhere. And this is where time stops being background noise and becomes the biggest problem. Because in cases like this, the first 72 hours matter more than anything. That's when evidence is freshest, when witness memories are sharpest, when the scene is as untouched as it will ever be. What happens or doesn't happen in that window defines everything that follows. And if that time isn't fully used, there's no reset button. The investigation continues, but from a weaker position. Those hours don't come back. So when you step back and take in the full picture, it's not just one issue. It's a chain of them. An unsecured crime scene. A private lab chosen over federal resources. A public conclusion announced before the evidence was complete. Conflicting communication along the way. Internal criticism from within the department itself. An unresolved accusation about how evidence was handled. And now, a 4-decade-old forced departure from another department. Hidden until a newspaper uncovered it. On their own, each of these could be explained. But together, they form a pattern. And that pattern is getting harder to ignore. Now, to be clear, this does not mean Chris Nanos is connected to Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. It does not mean the entire investigation is compromised beyond repair. There are federal agents, forensic experts, and investigators working behind the scenes, doing real work that never makes it into a press briefing. That matters. But leadership matters too, because leadership shapes decisions, and those decisions shape the direction and the outcome of everything. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She depends on daily medication. She has now been missing for 39 days. Her family has held themselves together through all of this. They've cooperated fully. They've put up more than $1 million in reward money. They've shown up, publicly and privately, doing everything they can to bring her home. They deserve answers. They deserve transparency. They deserve confidence that this process is being handled the right way. And that brings everything back to one question. A question no one in authority has clearly answered. With everything that's come to light, about how this investigation has unfolded, and about the history of the man leading it, is the right person in charge? Because with every day that passes without an arrest, that question gets louder. With every lead that goes nowhere, it becomes harder to ignore. With every inconsistency, it becomes harder to dismiss. And eventually, it stops being a question at all. It gets answered, either by results finally appearing, or by the silence that continues in their place.